Hey.
I think we're live. Turn me down there.
I've definitely got the good Florida look in the background.
Yeah, that's nice.
With the it's like the half hanging palm tree.
That's nice. Nice shirt.
You know what? I think we've gotten to the point now where, and just so you guys know, we did not talk. I don't know what it was. I just said, I don't have to tell her I'm wearing purple today. She just knows. Jen knows.
Well, okay. Peter has this OCD thing about that we have to wear the opposite shirt. So if I'm wearing the jersey, he's wearing the t-shirt, and vice versa. He has to have it that way. And if he's not wearing a shirt, one of them, I have to dress up because he's wearing a jacket. So basically he dictates this, but we didn't talk today, and I just knew this one, so I don't know why.
Well, because the last one I think we did was with that with the last show we did. You wore the purple, and I
did, but I also wanted to tell you, I finally did laundry.
So well, that's good to know. How's the moving going? Everything good?
My house is chaos. Boxes everywhere. It feels like I keep getting boxes done, but yet it doesn't look like anything's getting done. And I feel like I can't complete any one space. We're just like all over the place.
Please put the banners up.
Oh, banners. Sorry.
All good.
This is what happens when you play Commando.
Well, if I could control everything on my end, then that would be different.
Oh, I'm sure you would. Well, we can do it that way. You would just have to log in under generational change as well, I think.
That's fair.
I don't know. We don't know what we're doing.
No, but we're learning.
No idea.
It is Sunday.
Did you at least look at the stories for today?
Yes.
I took 2 of yours. You need to stop sending me any. You send me some sensationalist stuff. Like this stuff that I don't want to talk about Donald Trump. I don't want to talk about missing people and
really
no.
don't want to talk about Trump?
No, I don't. And so I am. Do you notice I find infinitely more substantive articles every time?
Yes.
Do you know why? Do you know why?
Because you do better research than me sometimes.
Exactly.
Something like that.
Yeah, something like that. So, did you, by any chance, catch a glimpse of the story about the Seminole tribe?
Yes, I did. And as you have said many times before, there are Native Americans of our country, and then there are the Seminoles. There is a huge difference between the way business is conducted amongst their tribe, and as we know, they.
If there were privilege in any way amongst tribes, the Seminoles are definitely that. It just is. So I don't think most people that don't know that, because it's only Florida Seminoles. If you're an Oklahoma Seminole, you don't have that same privilege.
Well, I have an interesting story to share, which I will share when Steve comes on.
He's back there. I see him back there. He's waving now. You can't see behind this. This is also the problem of you being here as like a guest on StreamYard, is that you can't see what's going on.
So you guys could be having your own little private conversation right now, and I would be none the wiser. So, you could do that. I can leave. You guys can enjoy.
For all you know, I'm having private conversations with Steve all the time. You have no idea what I do. I might be. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not telling you my personal business.
But I have an interesting story to share that we could start off with that happened last night when I was having dinner here at the complex that I'm staying at here in Naples. So why don't we?
Is it Del Boca Vista? Are you at Del Boca Vista?
I'm with the Gentiles, not the Jews.
Okay, all right. So the Naples Gentiles. I appreciate that. And for people who don't know, there's a difference.
Big time.
Yeah.
Huge difference. Hey, Christina. Yeah, we're definitely. There is a lot of observation to take in from what I call, Trump country here on the west coast of Florida. And it is, or DeSantis country, depending on how you want to look at it. But, very, very interesting observation. So, definitely a lot to share. They do the early birds here. That is something that is not unheralded.
Look who's showing up to eat at 6 o'clock.
Seinfeld's too good for the early bird.
Sometimes
I want to take my parents out to dinner at the right time. Why is everybody getting on me?
You're
Sorry.
all I can do is hope that enough people that watch this understand the references.
At that moment,
okay,
I was a marine biologist.
And as God is my witness, right? What did he do? Oh no, he reached into the hole of the great beast.
The great beast appeared before me.
I am
and
adding.
Drew Tideway lifted me on top. I said, "Easy, big fella."
That's actually pretty good. Like your
I couldn't see with all the waves crashing down upon me, but I knew something was obstructing its breathing. So I reached in and pulled out the obstruction.
Okay, nobody else is probably following this one. All right, guys. So let's just get into it. I was actually just adding. We got a new patron last week, which is exciting for us. Like everyone
doesn't happen too often, so
it doesn't happen too often. So shout out to Kyler Asado, and that's what I was doing. I was adding.
Love you, Kyler. Great support. Awesome guy.
So anyway,
let me just say to Kyler, we appreciate you. We support you in every way. You're making America not just great again. You're making America great again. And by the way, and that is another thing we're going to talk about with Steve. Let's get him in here because that.
All right. But wait, I feel like I have to give the fancy introduction. Okay. Does anybody watch us not know who Steve Grumbine is? I don't think anybody who watches.
Well, all our MMTers out there, modern monetary theory, federal jobs guarantee. We are a currency issuer, not a user.
So we are going to be talking about, and I did name this sexier. I have started thinking about what our government is doing to us as it's economic warfare. We use it as a phrase when we talk about things we do with other countries, but somehow we don't really talk about it as being used against our own people. But that's what this is. That's where I feel like that's where we're at. So plus I thought it read better than just reconciliation through MMT. That just sounded really kind of really boring.
Yeah.
Thoughts? Steve, thoughts?
Hey man, my tagline on Twitter is not an accident. I am austerity is murder, and these folks are committing a lot of crimes in the name of keeping themselves fat and us starving and fighting for table scraps. So yeah, it's absolutely the right call.
Well,
Thank you so much for coming on this morning.
You know, I want to tell you, first of all, for anybody that's listening, you know, Jen and Peter asked me to come on a little while ago, and this is the very first year that my autistic son gets to go to real public schools. And of course, it's in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of a battle about masking and not masking and on and on and on. And this is the very first year that the school that he's in is all day kindergarten. In other words, they used to have an AM or a PM. He's
right.
An autistic young man, never been all of a sudden, wham, right in the middle of an all day kindergarten. And so he's got his sister who is a few years older than him, keeps a good eye on him, but it's scary. You know, you got a kid that doesn't verbalize well, doesn't really understand some things, is still a couple years back on the maturity level in some areas. And so the opportunity for me to go on your show came up, but I had to be there for my kids. And normally I don't make an apology for this because this is serious stuff. That's the real responsibilities, but I make an apology to you because my availability is so weird and you guys have been so flexible and willing to have me on. So I want to thank you for accommodating my life.
No,
so
that's what it's all about. Actually, you're sitting there describing your son. It's really, if you would fast forward to 9th grade, that's my son this year. And this is his first time in a typical school. He is not on the spectrum, but he has 3 learning disabilities and ADHD, and the kid's got issues, right? Like, so he's always been with kids that have issues. And this is his first year in a typical school in 9th grade. So I completely understand.
Right. Now, in honor of being on your show, you'll notice that I have Steal Your Face.
Oh, nice. Nice.
So I made sure I have my dead stuff on.
That's so nice.
Well, I didn't know the Dead were Washington Capitals fans, but that's pretty cool.
They are. Well, the ones that are still living, not the dead.
How long would it take you to get to DC from where you are? Because it's kind of, it's interesting how the states are in the Northeast, the way that geographically speaking. It's like an hour, I guess, for you?
It's a little longer than that. So for me, I'm about 2.5 hours from the district. It takes me about 2 hours to get like to FedEx Field, but it's about 2.5 hours to actually get in the district with traffic. So
Recently there, that is the worst traffic I have ever experienced going to a football game. I was there for the Giants.
oh, you poor guy.
Oh my God. I mean, I thought it was
all comes down to sports for him.
well, that's life.
Sports
That's
ball, yeah.
If there's a way that you can incorporate sports into politics, then you must do it.
That's right. Every analogy must be a sports ball analogy.
Well, as you alluded to, and I must say, you have an open invitation.
Of
You
course.
have an open invitation. Nina Turner has an open invitation.
Well, there's certain people.
Jordan Chariton has an open invitation.
Yeah.
There's just certain people that if they say, "Hey, can I come on?" You're coming on.
But we do need to talk about reconciliation. I mean, it's unfortunate that we're still talking about this because it's ridiculous. Like, as people that understand about how this actually really works, do you also feel like, for me, I feel like I'm sitting here and watching them fight over money that is not even real numbers, and watching them sit there and nitpick on things when they don't need to. And just, it's very frustrating to watch this. So, I mean, I can only imagine how you feel about this, Steve.
Well, it's doubly funny. I had John Yarmouth and his son Aaron on with me a few weeks back, and we talked about this, and he likened this whole process to having already voted once to authorize the spending that is going on, and then get to the end of the year, and now all of a sudden the quote unquote debt limit is up, so we get to vote on it yet again. And he was like, amazing that Mitch McConnell and the gang that are pushing back on this stuff aren't offering to give the money back that they got when it was spent, now that they don't want to have the debt ceiling looming over them. And so it's kind of like a weird thing where, these guys are thieves. I mean, you know what I mean? But this right here, this particular story, and I've talked about it quite a bit lately, so I hope that I get to bring this fresh to you all. And that is that ultimately this is a lie. This is a joke. This is a farce. So in our economy, we have massive amounts of what we call automatic stabilizers. So like fuel injectors into the economy. They're things that you have long since forgotten about. Something bad happens, it triggers something good to happen or something different to happen. And they go without votes. There's no need for votes anymore. So like, for like SNAP and TANF and stuff like that, they rise and fall depending upon the way people's employment is at any given time. If the economy is really, really great, there'll be very few people that are on those programs, or reduced, should I say. But if the economy is really cruddy, then all of a sudden people automatically roll onto those programs. So the spending goes up. Well, you can't really tell at all times what's going to happen. That's why they bake these automatic stabilizers in, so people aren't constantly waiting around for Congress to fight with each other to produce these basic benefits. So at the end of the year, you've budgeted X amount of money for the spending, which is stupid because we create the money out of thin air, right? But they make this budget. And then if it goes beyond that, if they have to quote unquote print more money, which is not how this works, and I shoot me now for saying that out loud. But if they have to actually dig into the coffers and generate more currency or whatever, this creates an opportunity for whichever opposing side is out of power. And this happens all the time. You've been around the debt ceiling for most of your adult life here. I mean, this is one of those things where it's used by both parties use this as a weapon, but it's a weapon that is constitutionally protected too, by the way, because the Constitution says we must pay that bill. Okay, Congress must do that. Article 1, Section 8 gives the power of spending and, the purse in general to Congress. So, it's a game that needs to go away. And I think that you also are aware that Rashida Tlaib had back in the day came out with the ABC Act for making payments. And they talked about minting $1 trillion coins and depositing them at the Fed to go ahead and make these payments. And the concept of the $1 trillion coin is just to say, hey, we're not gonna, you can't put that debt on us anymore. You can't call it debt anymore. We've just deposited $1 trillion coin into the account, so just go away with that. We're going to go ahead and spend just fine now. The difference is that Congress has to authorize that spending, and they already have. So this debt ceiling is a joke.
Yeah.
And I really do think that this is, again, the longer this goes on, especially with the antics of Manchin and Sinema, because that's what everybody gravitates to. But it really does expose the hypocrisy of what is actually going on here. They can, again, this constantly reaffirming the message that we are a currency issuer. We can absolutely print the money that is necessary. We must control inflation. That is an issue that we can absolutely talk about. But now, Biden lifts the debt ceiling and they try to hail him as a hero. And you know what? Maybe 10, 20 years ago, they would say, oh, he did such a great thing. Now people are like, that doesn't do anything. That just momentarily stops the problem. It's not actually solving the infrastructural problems that we have. And so somebody like a Manchin is, he's a good rotating villain. But I think they're in the spotlight a lot longer than they want to be, because now people are starting to sift through their little nooks and crannies in their records and see what they're up to, and the people who are stuffing money in their back pocket. I even said the other day, Kyrsten Sinema, she only took $100,000 to get bought off. She's cheap, considering how bad of a 3.5 trillion reconciliation package that absolutely will change this country in so many ways.
You're assuming that she's not playing the long game and hasn't been offered whatever she's been offered down the road, because she clearly doesn't care about being reelected. And so who knows what job offers are waiting her down on that side. That's what I think. I think she's obviously working literally for somebody else right now.
I think it's, Stephen, if you can address, because obviously the two biggest parts of this particular reconciliation package, of course, is the environment and healthcare. It's the two most significant issues of our time. President Manchin, as we should call him, is trying to get this cut out in terms of, he's dealing with the environmental side, and Kyrsten Sinema is dealing with the healthcare side. So, of course, the two biggest conglomerates, big pharma, big oil, they're playing their role. And they're basically filling whoever coffer they need to get what they want done. But I think, like I said, the longer this goes on, I think this really exposes the system in a way that the powers that be are starting to probably get a little concerned that maybe they're losing control of the narrative. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that they don't really care about us losing the narrative, because they ultimately, even like the pandemic, exposed everything, right? It really did. I mean, it exposed the fact that we can afford to create money out of thin air, even when people aren't working. You see what I'm saying? When the state coffers are drying up, we could still find a way to get money out there, right? We could still do that, right? And so when that's happening, that should fundamentally tell every soul in America that we didn't need taxes to actually pay for those things. And so all this hand wringing about the debt ceiling, this should be like just part 2 of the same exact, oh my God, I realize now what the hell's going on. And this whole thing with Manchin and Sinema, I want to be clear on this. I'm not sure how much of that I even buy, because ultimately there's, like you said, there's always a rotating villain. There's always a rotating villain. And these two just happen to be the, whatever. I mean, think about how much we hated Pete Buttigieg, and all of a sudden he's transportation secretary. You know what I mean? Like, this is the stuff that you use. I don't even know how much of this stuff is real. I'll be honest with you. When I watch it, I'm just sort of going, It's almost defies logic that they can get away with saying the stuff they're saying. But when nobody really understands and nobody pushes back, they can say anything they want. And that's, in my opinion, that's where the MMT activism comes in, is being able to not only awaken, the populace, but to also put the politicians and the people behind them on notice that we know what you did last summer, and we're going to make sure that you pay for it. And I think that right there is what's missing in this equation, because unfortunately, you've got the voices that are really, really easy to glom onto. I don't know, maybe they have a pretty face, maybe they have a way of saying things, whatever, but they don't have an understanding of this stuff. So we've got leaders out there pushing, activists pushing, but they're pushing without knowledge. And that's why this debate about the debt ceiling keeps going on and on. I hope you're right. I hope they see the cracks in the veneer and that all of a sudden they're starting to panic. I don't think so. I think they know that the average rank and file voter, sadly, is more interested in being comfortable than they are in actually fighting back against these things. Because to the apathetic, this seems like a hill too tall for them. What do I do? How can I even impact this? So they end up just writing it off, and then it just keeps perpetuating. But we got to put our stake in the ground. We've got to literally stiffen our back and fight back against this. So, for what it's worth, I think that we owe our collective listeners and our fellow activists, a constant reminder that this is the most important issue facing the environment, facing healthcare, facing education, facing any number of policy proposals you would put forward. There can be no greater issue than how we're going to pay for it. So we've got to get that out of the way.
We have Mike Holden, welcome to the show, who wants to know from as I call you, your new name is now the MMT Commander-in-Chief. So I'd like to hear more of why taxes don't fund spending, because a lot of people don't seem to understand how that works at the federal level.
Okay. So taxes are used to drive our need for currency. The reason why Bitcoin is not going to displace the dollar is because we tax in the dollar. You have an obligation that's only payable in US dollars. The federal government spends that money into the economy. So clearly, if it's spending first and then taxing later, it didn't need your tax dollar to spend the first dollar. And so what happens is that Congress spends and then taxes some of it back to keep you needing currency. It generates a marketplace. It creates buyers and sellers of goods. It generates a need for employment. It generates the first unemployed person. And so that brings us into the job guarantee. But the point is that taxes are literally a way of, it's like the carrot and the stick of currency, of keeping the engine of the economy going. So if you need currency to pay your taxes, then you're going to do something to get said currency. But when that tax is received, when Congress authorizes a tax, levies a tax, and then we pay that tax, that money is functionally deleted, like the dark crystal. If you remember that old movie, you had the light crystal, you had the dark guys, they came together and they were one. Well, the tax, when they spend the money, they put money on the one side of the ledger, and when you get it, you've got it on the other. That's the asset side. But when you pay that back in taxes, this whole entry zeroes out, and voila, you've drained the reserves that were backing that. It's a lot of complicated nonsense that goes on behind the scenes. But fact of the matter is that those dollars are functionally deleted when they're received as a tax. So they don't pay for anything. They're never reused. Your hard-earned tax dollar never pays for Israel, never pays for abortions, never pays for healthcare, never pays for the things you love and want. And it doesn't pay for war either. How interesting is that? Yeah. Taxes simply keep the dollar, so that the government can provision itself. And that's what they do.
I also think it's a means for people to have some sense of like ownership of what's going on. It's sort of like this mirage of, well, it's our tax dollars, so we get a say so on this. When that's in fact, right. So, but I do think that even if we think that, like, I know that what you're saying is true, and yet I still feel like that when I look at our war spending and our military spending, I do feel like some sort of ownership where I should be able to say, no, I don't want it spent that way. I want it spent this way. And yes. I do think we should have that regardless of whether it's from tax dollars. Like, it's just about ownership of those are our representatives.
That's
right?
A priority though, right? That's your priority. That is your morals coming out into your spending, right? But that's not we can't afford this conversation, right? And that's the most important thing, because the sword you use to defeat your enemies, if it's not real, is going to be the sword they use to defeat you when you go for healthcare. So it's very important to remember that the weapons we bring out to do these debates, they're not just a one-way street. If we start fighting about, clamping down on speech or clamping down on this, It always comes back the other way, always. Okay.
Yeah.
And so when you're talking about, my hard-earned tax dollars, I don't want it going to war. That's a great statement. It's factually incorrect. But what you could do, and this is the thing that I think MMTers are trying to do, we're trying to get you to call it public money. We're trying to get you to understand it's the public's purse. It's not your money. It's not your hard-earned tax dollars. It's the country's. It's public. It's like an institution. It's a law. And instead of thinking that it's somehow or another you funded that in that sense, the idea here is that we collectively own this country. This is our country. And we have some choices. We should have some choices in what those priorities are. And so when we talk about that, I really think we need to shift away, because what do you think the taxpayer looks like? A taxpayer in the modern vernacular looks probably like a stuffy old white guy, right? With hair parted, or maybe a slick white guy with the double guns. Doesn't look like a young black guy. Doesn't look like a gay or a lesbian, homeless person. It doesn't look like anything. So it's very exclusionary, and it's very intentional too, by the way. There's a great article called "The Dangerous Myth of Taxpayer Money," and it is in Splinter magazine by Jesse Meyerson and Raul Carrillo. Please read it. Find it, Splinter magazine, and the title of the article is "The Dangerous Myth of Taxpayer Money." Go out and read it. It really breaks down how this is a racist trope that was really strung along by Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan to show there is no such thing as public money. There is only taxpayer dollars, right out of Maggie Thatcher's mouth. And so this perpetuates the neoliberal paradigm that we need the rich people. Please, sir, give us your money. Please, sir, help us fund this industry. We need your money, sir, so we can have health care. And it's that lie that keeps us distracted from fighting for better. So I'd be very, very careful rationalizing, well, in this case, taxpayer money is a good idea. Never a good idea, unless you're talking about state finances, the state and local communities. That's a true statement. That's where you want to play with that one.
Yeah, and I always and Jen is she recently listened to the autobiography by Ilhan Omar, and I have a hell of a lot of respect for her. But her coming out saying that her political idol is Maggie Thatcher.
I know, what the hell.
You want to say that she admires Maggie's conviction and attitude and leadership capability? Okay, fine. I mean, specify that it isn't necessarily about the policy she enacted.
Can I ask you, have you read her book?
I have not
me?
read her
So
book.
no, I'm talking to Peter, because you have no idea why she likes Margaret Thatcher, why she admired Margaret Thatcher.
I'm sure that the reasons are different than the way that they're trying to turn it into a gotcha with corporate media.
There's no gotcha. She's very clear about it in her book. And I'm not exactly a Thatcher fan, but the way Ilhan describes it is, this is a woman in a man's world fighting for things. Like, you see things differently when you come from somewhere different.
It's no different.
Why not choose Stephanie Kelton? She is a woman in an economics career path.
I mean, look, because
what could be more?
I know, but you're talking about like someone sort of, who they looked up to.
This is what happens when you have heroes in politics. It's a big problem. And, to be fair, everyone wants to say, oh, we need a woman to do this, a woman to do that. The first woman on the Supreme Court was Sandra Day O'Connor, and she happened to be a conservative. And that doesn't jive with the narrative that is used in the political sphere. No different than, somebody like Clarence Thomas. Again, it's all about the meat and potatoes. What are we actually doing to make change? And so one of the things that we're noticing right now is a lot of these local unions and even national unions, the labor is starting to put their foot down and say, no, we're worth more than the owners, if you will. So we're actually going to prove that. And we saw what just happened with John Deere. The workers stopped working, and they're trying to, John Deere, rather than adhering to what the workers want, they're trying to get administrators within the organization to work the tractors. I'm like, this thing's going to end in a few days because they don't know how to do this. They've gotten so greedy. They have completely undermined the workforce. And now the workforce is starting to get a little, confident about their ability to actually make things happen. What are your thoughts about, just throwing everything aside? The whole concept of money is this idea that I have to give you something in order for you to do something. Well, that's sort of the concept here with the labor force, is that you want us to do something, you need us to do it, we want more than what you're giving us. And if you don't give it to us, we're not doing it. And then you're really screwed.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a strong believer in unions, and we have a very, very weak union presence in the United States. They have steadily been anti-labor for the last 50 years, maybe even longer. I mean, but the last 50 years has been a real chokehold on labor. And we've seen labor unions, both private and public sector, diminish to nothing. Public is a little bit bigger, but they've got a lot of rules around what they can and can't do. But they've made it very, very hard to strike. They've made it very, very hard to do any kind of real direct action. But the flip side to that is that, where there's a spark, there could be a fire, and you hope to see more unions stepping up, doing this stuff, especially while they have a moment to get a foothold. This pandemic has created supply chain issues and labor shortages because people have decided they're not going to take it anymore. So my hope is that there's something good that comes from it. I'm going to be honest with you, though. If you know the way this country works, the kinds of strikes that it would take to really, really push things over the edge are like in shipping and in transportation, in the truckers industry, the longshoremen, things that are bringing products and services around the country and around the world. You want to see real change. That's where the strikes need to occur. And I think that the other thing that really needs to take place is that rather than just picket signs and things like that, yes, it's very, very good, but you go out into the streets and you block a very, very unfortunate crosswalk where, very important people want to get to the other side and you're blocking it. To me, this is where we're going to start seeing some real change. I don't know that these industries that are striking right now, they're a good story. It's great to see labor fighting back. But for everyone's sake, to get a perspective, these are not the critical areas right now where you can bring the economy to a shutdown. You really need to have those strategic areas committed to a strike as well. And then you need to have people committed to not crossing that line. But I'm very happy for I'm glad to see some labor have a pulse. It's like boop, 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 boop. That's very, very good.
I mean, we're definitely prioritizing pushing to pass the PRO Act. And especially, I mean, in Florida, we're a right to work state here. So it's so
same PA.
Really. So it's even the already sort of neutered labor movement is even more so. I don't even, it's weird because when you're a right to work state, so you're allowed to have unions. We have unions. Their unions are there. They're just not allowed to do anything. So I don't understand that. Like, I really don't understand that. I should know this, but if like any cases have been brought against with that, like, cause to me, it seems like you wouldn't be able to do that, but.
Yeah, I'm not a law guy. I would love to be a law guy, but I'm not a law guy. But a lot of the people that we work with are law people. And, one of the things that came out of some conversations with those MMT type folks and Sarah Nelson, who is a big name in the union space. She's the head of the airline attendants union. She said that there's no such thing as an illegal strike, only a successful or an unsuccessful strike. And I think that that's an important thing to think about because we need to start not asking permission, right? I mean, if you're getting permits, if you're doing all these things, what you've got is a parade, right? You've got a rally. If you're going out there and doing it, you got a strike. And I think that it's important to think about, what is your goal here? Is your goal performative to just bring awareness, or is your goal to seriously make change? And, we don't have mutual aid in this country. So people are left to whatever savings they have to try to stay out on strike, to do direct action, whatever. Without that mutual aid in there, it's going to be short-lived. These things don't have the resources to just keep going in perpetuity, or they have to start making real sacrifices to their family that extend beyond just I missed a week of work. As you know, most people in this country don't have a paycheck of buffer between them and destitution right now. So taking off for a couple of weeks for strike, that's a real heroic act, and they're taking a real sacrifice there. But we don't have the we don't have the alternative parallel networks in place for mutual aid and other such things to help those folks that take those actions to be able to keep their family eating. And I think that's something that we should really think about in terms of general strike readiness, as opposed to just individual one-off strikes here and there. As a rule, without having all that mutual aid there, a general strike will be very short-lived, and it would be performative at best, I think.
And how to get mutual aid set up. I mean, that's one of those things that you see in places like in, I forget the town in Alabama right now that's having the miners' strike. No, Bessemer was Amazon. But
hold on. I got to read. Please put this comment up there. BL.
Hey, hold on.
Please put BL's comment. Look at this. I see that. I just have to make a comment.
I don't even know who that is. Well, you know what? That's unfortunate.
I see him. He's on a lot.
Is he?
Again, you're a scary guy, Steve. You're trying to tell people how to improve their lives.
I think you're so cute. Like, I sit here and think, God, he's aging so nicely, and I like it.
Come on, make it better. Oh. How about now?
Just for you, dude. Just for you.
Just
for you, BL. Just for you.
That's just horrible.
I love when some asshole. It's like, I don't give a shit.
But you're so well kempt. It's not like you're not like all scruffy and unkempt. I don't know. But I like facial hair, so whatever.
Hey, look, I look at it like this. I just trimmed the beard down. Like, I've got 2 master's degrees. I'm a senior project manager. I run 2 nonprofits. If the poor guy can't deal with my scruff, he can go. He can deal with his own issues. I got tissues. I'm sorry, I digress. That just cracks me up. When a loser talks about somebody's looks, you just know that they woke up and stole someone else's oxygen, because there's nothing to be talked about with somebody's looks.
Speaking of scary looking guys, because I can certainly understand people being a little intimidated by him, but Mr. Fetterman, who is running to be the next U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania, and in my personal opinion, is the best option that is running. We'd love to hear your thoughts. We would love to have him on. He seems to be somebody who really has a pulse on what really needs to be done, and really sort of represents Pennsylvania, on top of the fact he's already the lieutenant governor. So he's already somebody who's got name recognition all throughout the state. We're very upset with, a couple of progressive organizations that didn't support him. And there's probably some layers to that. But please bring us up to speed as to what's going on with the U.S. Senate race in Pennsylvania. It's a huge race. And obviously, like I said, I think John Fetterman is the best option that Pennsylvania has. Your thoughts on the race, and obviously, John.
John's got some policy positions that I like. John has gone the way of the centrist a few times that has cost him some progressive support. I'm not, I don't have it all detailed, so I don't want to get into all the specifics there. But John's been around. He is definitely, he didn't get a Bernie endorsement the first time. I don't know if you remember that. He was one of the ones that was kind of left behind, but he was a big Bernie guy back in the day, and I think a lot of people turned on him when he fell in line for Hillary. But ultimately he probably is the best of what we've got running. He definitely has become part of the party. He's a pro weed guy, so he's got some credentials in there that make him attractive in that sense. But in the absence of anything better, he is the best we got going right now. I'm not a huge fan. I don't hate him or anything like that. I'll probably vote for him when the time comes. But
you're so spoiled, Steve. You have no idea what we've got to deal with. Our candidates, like, you're there. You have a candidate that's pro weed, was a Bernie supporter, and you're kind of like, I'll vote for him. I guess he's the best of the options.
Well, it's the way I'm looking at though is this, right? Pennsylvania is very much a purple state. Okay. And so when you talk about anyone getting elected into the state, you're still talking about a right of center left. Okay. It's a pro business, it's Republican light, and so you do feel a little squeamish I mean, the only solution really is to either get a bunch of people to move into Pennsylvania and make it, you know, a lefty state, or move out to a lefty state, right? And so it is, unfortunately, it tends to be very conservative in a lot of ways. And you know, you could see the debates and you can see all that stuff, and it just, after a little while, it kind of blurs together, because they're fighting over this tiny little thing. They're not really, they don't really produce solutions that stretch. They're
No.
always kind of like degrees of separation. And I think that's where the real pushback comes from. It's really more a matter of the smallness of their vision. And,
well, they're only allowed within certain parameters. So they're stuck with whatever parameters they're in. And so when you say to the left or to the right of a 2-inch space,
yes,
it really doesn't matter whether you're left or right. But I would still suggest that is infinitely better than what we have going on.
I don't want to be in Death Santa's land, man. My God, that guy is a crank.
And by the way, you know, let's not forget that one of our senators is Rick Scott, who lowered the bar for governorship here so low that I'm not even completely hateful of DeSantis, because really it's a step up for us. And now we have Rick Scott as one of our senators. So yeah, Florida's in a bad way.
Yeah, there's always the perception about, you know, the national, the national image of DeSantis versus some of the things that he does, you know, in terms of like the environment, for example. It is what it is. But when I look at a state like Pennsylvania, as I think we've discussed before on the show, there's Philadelphia to the east, Pittsburgh to the west, and Pennsylvania right in the middle. And that's
exactly it.
That's basically what you're dealing with. And, you know, you have to be able to sort of blend these things together. And, you know, the thing about Fetterman is that he is the lone, well, he appears to be the lone non-corporate candidate with even a shot at pulling this off. But what I would be doing if I was Fetterman is I would basically be saying, look, get me into the Senate, and the crap that, you know, Manchin is pulling and that Sinema is pulling, you've got another vote right here for that reconciliation bill or whatever may happen to come up in the next legislative session. You're not going to have to worry about me and me screwing over working people. That's the way I would sell it.
Yeah.
But, you know, what do I know?
No, I mean, again, he is the best we've got. So, you know, it's lukewarm what I'm saying, because I'm lukewarm about this stuff to begin with when it comes to these guys. But as far as being the best we have, he's definitely that.
And I think, and this is a good opportunity for me to share a story from last night. I'm in Naples, so I'm in a, you know, the very, you know, I'm in Trump country, if you will. And so I was having dinner, and this lady who, you know, was older and, you know, very much a Trump supporter and very much down the rabbit hole of the election was stolen and all this, that, and the other thing. And of course, having a conversation about that, you're not going to get anywhere. But I ended up having a conversation about a multitude of different issues, not the least of which was universal health care, and explaining to her how we simply have a for-profit middleman system that has no reason to exist. And she started going off about, oh, the Cignas and the Aetnas and the Pfizers. And I'm like, yeah, if we had a universal healthcare system like Medicare for all, you wouldn't have to worry about those idiots. And having that conversation is very cathartic, because it makes you realize that we are not as different as people want us to believe that we are. When it comes to wedge issues, we're always going to have differences, and that's what people want us to focus on. But the real bread and butter issues that affect our everyday lives, most people agree on this stuff. Yeah, there's nihilists and there's anarchists and all that, but the overwhelming majority of people are going to agree once they understand something like, oh, we're a currency issuer, we're not a currency user. We actually can print money and use it for things that we actually want. And the more we keep reminding people of the importance of these concrete issues, the more I think we're going to get somewhere. That's what I took away from the conversation. And you can duplicate that as long as you're willing to have it. If somebody voted for Trump, look, you can hate Trump, but don't hate the voter. Recognize that that person could be agreeable on a lot of important things.
Well, I think we have to figure out how to look at the working class as a body. What is labor? And I talked about this the other night on another show where I said, you know, I think we need to expand what we consider to be labor, because ultimately, if you're not independently wealthy and have capital as your driver, you are in essence working for a living, whether it's, you know, hard work or whether it's white collar work, you're still working. And I think it's important that we stop dividing that up and start thinking to ourselves, the very, very rich and us, the rest of us need to find a way to unite here. And that would, unfortunately or fortunately, include people you don't agree with. And so how do we get those people to find the common ground so that we can build that? I don't know. I mean, I am a former Republican, so I speak fluent right-wing, talking points. And I just don't, I think so much of this is ideologically driven that goes beyond logic. Like, see, if you and I are sitting there having a cup of coffee, maybe we can have a logical conversation and get to an agreement, if you will. But when you're not in that one-on-one situation, you're group A to group B, it's all ideological versus all ideological. There is no real nuanced debate there at that point.
No, it's tribalism. It's complete tribalism.
Exactly.
And everybody likes to have a team, and everybody is just going to side with their team because it makes them feel better. And I feel like we are the people that are like trying to change that little by little, like trying to build a coalition of people that really are on the same team for the things that matter and stop getting distracted by the little things. But it is hard. And that's and the media obviously wants us to focus on the little things and just nitpicking and fighting, because if all the working people really got together, that would be a problem for them.
Absolutely. In fact, I think that they know that. I think that I use this reference a lot, but I think it's a valid reference. Way back, there was this thing called Bacon's Rebellion, where all the whites and blacks and everyone got together and fought back against the powers that be. They said, hey, we can't have this. And so they basically gave the poor white slobs a nickel more. And all of a sudden the collab broke up. the team broke up. And that wedge issue has been going on. It happened in Reconstruction. You give the poor Southerners a little teeny bit of a one-uppance, and all of a sudden they are, ready to break away from the others. Every time you see some convergence, every time you start seeing some sort of a real meaningful coming together of society, they throw the wedge issue in, and it's almost always successful, sadly.
I know. I feel like I'm always like, don't look at it. Don't look away from the sun, and it's really, really hard. And I think that it's a lot of people, I think, feel overwhelmed when you start talking about the gravity of what really does need to happen and the changes that we do need to make. And it really is somehow psychologically easier to focus on smaller issues because it just seems so much more manageable. And you could just sort of come up with some sort of rule and make whether it's, the gun issue where you've got people that's like ban assault weapons. Like you just want to come up with a solution, and then you feel better about it because you came up with a solution. Whether or not it works is another story. And I think that when you look at the big things, that people just feel so unbelievably, they just can't even go there.
Yeah. It's over. It's tough. I mean, getting up in the morning is tough, right? You work 8 hours, you drove to work, you came home, you got kids or whatever it is you've got to do. And it just keeps going. The grind, it just grinds you to a nub. And then to suddenly have bold aspirational political, concepts, after you've, killed yourself for 8 to 10 hours or whatever. I mean, it's not practical to believe that that's going to be the universal truth. And so I think that we need to understand that. And, it is what it is. I saw something interesting. There's a gentleman named Mike Holden. Can you put his comment up there? I'd like to speak to this. I think it's a comment that comes up very frequently. And so Mike said, with 97% of the money created by private banks and non-public aspect of the Fed, makes me doubt the U.S. government is not a currency user. Well, here's the thing, right? The federal government spoke the Fed into existence. Okay. So the Fed is like if you ever had a telephone at your house, a regular from the phone company, that is, you have a D mark on the side of your house. You open up the thing. On one side is the NID, the public facing. You pull that jack out and it goes into your house. You can see if you've got a short or a leaky fault in the house, but you can also look back toward the central office. And what the Federal Reserve is basically that D mark. It's the demarc between the public and the private, and it's the nation's central bank. Okay, just like the Bank of England, Bank of Japan, Bank of Australia, all these central banks are there because the countries have to clear payments. Otherwise, you have 100 different banks out there. I got Billy Bucks, you got Joey Bucks, you got Kangaroo Bucks, whatever. And it's almost like foreign exchange in your own country. So the Fed was there to bring price stability. It was there to bring a clearing of payments. It was there to remove a lot of the corruption. You see corruption today. It's a different kind of corruption. But back then, the corruption, I mean, you're like putting your thumb on your scale, people saying, oh, that dollar came from Chase. It's only worth 90 cents versus, $1 or whatever. And so the bizarreness of our financial system pre-Federal Reserve and post-Federal Reserve is not to be scoffed at. It's a very strange world we live in. But banks making 97% of the money, let me explain to you, money only gets into the economy two ways. Number one, the Congress spending money into the economy, that right there is a net financial asset. And that is not debt like what we know it. What you're talking about with banks putting 97% of the money into the economy, the federal government doesn't take private bank money. What the federal government does is it makes a choice. It doesn't want to spend on the people. It will let us go into private debt. This is absolutely 100% the neoliberal perspective on the economy. Is we're not going to let the public do it because, oh my God, that'd be communism. No, we're going to let you go out and take a loan from a bank. And so when banks create money, what they do is create US dollar denominated IOUs. They can't create net financial assets. So when you take that money out in the loan, which is where that money from that 97% that was put out there comes from, it's a loan. When you pay that loan off, it zeroes out. It purges the reserves that were used to hold that in place. And then that money is no longer there. What the bank keeps is the interest. And that interest came from net financial assets and other loans. And they keep that money. So that right there is where their profit comes from. But the actual loan itself, they have been given a charter as part of their relationship with Congress. And this is to exact the ability to do banking, but it's also there to clear payments and so forth, and provide loans and so forth. So it's very important to understand the federal government is not it's spending loans into the economy. Federal government is spending new, free, clear money into the economy. The 97% is because the Congress has not been spending on us and has instead said, no, go to a bank, take out a loan, and let's go ahead and fuel the fire sector. That has nothing to do with who's the currency user or who's the currency issuer. And it's very important to take that, what I just said, remember it forever and never let it go, because it's so important, because this is why we're pushing the federal government to spend, because the money they spend is money we don't have to borrow as private citizens. Okay. The more we have the federal government spend, the less precarious our lives are. The more that we have to take out loans, the more banks, the more shadow banks, the more Wall Street speculators, the more investor grade people, the traders, etc., get fat and wealthy. So it's important to see the two. But the problem is that when you take away federal infusions into the economy, you start creating the fertile ground for recessions, because people eventually run out of credit worthiness. They run out of the ability to pay, and people become too heavy with debt and they can no longer take on more debt. And that brings the economy to a crawl. So just remember that 97% is a political choice that Congress has made to not spend on the people, because silly people think it's communism to do that, as opposed to letting us all go into private debt. And this is the fight. This is the battle. I mean, this is ground zero of the progressives versus the capital corporatists battle. Liz Warren loves markets. She would love for you to be able to take out loans, have access to loans, have access to these sorts of resources, like just like access to healthcare, right? So this is the battle. This is literally the battle. I don't have a problem with banks doing what they were chartered to do. Banks are doing that because there's a demand for credit, because Congress is not spending. And by them not spending, and by them not putting some sort of rough rules around the difference between CEOs' pay and the mean pay of their workers, the CEOs just take all the profit and gobble it up. You know, Bill Black wrote a great book called The Best Way to Rob a Bank is to Own One. Okay.
Yeah.
And so take a look at this book sometime if you really want to understand the corruption in the banking world. We have created an apparatus without any enforcement. We have no enforcement. We have regulators are nowhere near enough. Nowhere near enough. That's why you see the collapse that we saw in 2008, 2009. That's why you may see another one again. We don't have nearly enough auditors or regulators to go out there and verify what these shadow banks are doing and what these other industries are doing. And that's how citywide or countrywide and Citi and JP Morgan and all those fools brought the economy to its knees. Now, we could have fixed that. MMT knows. We all know that. But for those that didn't know that, what they did was they allowed these banks to literally bet on top of bets on top of bets with these shorts and CDLs and other debt instruments that they use to keep splicing bad debt over and over and over again. Bad bets. They just kept, hey, this is a grade A bond here, man. But it really had all kinds of bad mortgages rolled into it. And that's how the Bear Stearns guy, that's how they were able to find out that, hey, let's go ahead and short the market. This kind of corruption has been going on for a long time, and it's continuing to this day.
And
So
why is that? The reason it continues to this day is because they own our government. Corporate special interests is the issue of our time, and that is no bigger than with the big banks and the shareholders, the shell corporations. They make sure that if they do get caught, they only get a slap on the wrist. No one is going down for white collar crime the way that they should, because in other parts of the world, you know, they'll hang you in the town square if you do that type of ish. But you do it in the United States, you're rewarded for it.
You got it.
That is again, we say it all the time. Throw everything else out the window until we deal with corporate special interests owning our government. We'll never get anywhere. Ever.
Corruption. If we can eliminate corruption, okay. I'm not going to guarantee anything's perfect, but I can tell you right now, eliminating corruption by putting laws in place that really and funding the apparatus that allows it to monitor this, right, and actually regulate it. I think that right there is key to us moving forward. It literally is a locked door that we can't get through until we deal with it. And so, yeah.
Well, yeah. How do you get people to vote against their own self-interest, which is what we've been living with, right? So it's a slow trickle. You get one in here, and it's slowly happening. We are getting more non-corporate people into Congress. The fact that we have several states that have non-corporate people running for U.S. Senate is amazing to me. Like, if somebody can actually pull off a statewide race without taking corporate money, that will be a huge step. And so, I mean, we're starting to see it, but it's like, it feels slow, but I don't think it is, because, you know, 5 years ago, nobody was really talking about a lot of this stuff.
Right.
I mean, we were, but it wasn't as known of a thing.
I want to give a huge shout out to Double K.
Yes, Double K.
$50 is the largest super chat we've ever gotten. And Steve, I guess you have to get some big credit for that.
Well, I also have to shout out because Marianne's on here. So thank you, Marianne.
Hey.
Marianne Williamson.
Hey, wow, yeah.
We love her. So, Steve, your reputation precedes you. So that's
look at what you did. And so, Double K, if you're interested, you can become a patron. Peter, will you put the Patreon thing in the chat, please?
I don't know if I'm able to. I'm not.
Yes, as you're in here, you can do it. I think you can.
No.
You don't think you can?
No, I can't. I have to log in.
All right, but if you join as a patron. If you join as a patron, you get the Lulu sticker.
And if you do become a patron, you get to hear all types of funny, quirky stuff. Steve, one of the last things I want to talk about.
Wait, I'm going to plug Steve's Macro and Cheese because I have his sticker right here.
Oh, that's nice. There you go. Oh, that's great.
That's my laptop.
Podcast, which Jen has been on, and it was really great. Really great, really tremendous, really incredible. And I just want to let you know, Steve, you know, I've been saying on the show for the past several months, that we are going to make America great again, again. And I totally said it, and I said it for months. And now, did you see what the Trump administration just did? They totally made it their rallying cry. That is the name. They're calling it Make America Great Again, again. They heard us. They loved it. They appreciated it. Really tremendous. But seriously, I was saying, Jen, how long was I saying that for?
Oh no, we've been joking about that. You could definitely go back. Like you could go back clips on our show where Peter is like, "Make America Great Again, again," and we've been joking about that for the longest time.
When I
can't believe they're using that. That's so funny.
We went on the Humanist Report on this panel, and Mike really likes my impression, so he wanted me to do Trump's, and so I was just doing it, and I just did the Make America Great Again, again, and they all laughed their heads off. It was like 5 of them.
It's a TikTok waiting to happen.
Yeah,
it's great.
But then the next thing you know, he's actually using it.
You cannot make this shit up. You cannot make this shit up.
What is going on here? And I'm like, no, I definitely said it first.
So you need to make a TikTok where you have you two battling back and forth, saying "Making it great again, again."
Yeah, Steve, you should definitely get Marianne on one of your shows.
Hey, anytime Marianne will come on my show, I'm happy to have her on my show.
Yeah,
I would basically do a TikTok, and because I'm not a TikTok guy. I can do Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all that, but I like the idea of having a conversation because I could do the Trumpster. I could totally do the Trumpster. I could do the Slick Willie who just got out of the hospital today. He's doing okay. That's really great. And of course, I could do the senator from Vermont and tell Mr. Trump what an idiot he is and he doesn't understand economics, anything that's good for the country. So, and we have the masks, which is what makes it better. So I could actually do a TikTok, not me with the, you're not seeing my face. You would actually be looking at their image, hearing the voice, and having a conversation.
This is what he thinks of.
Hey, it would get a lot of attention, wouldn't it?
I think it would. I'm telling you, I have a whole bunch. I mean, that mask that I showed y'all, it's just one of the silly ones. But I've got a treasure trove of masks because we are going to start doing some TikToks and we are going to be doing some short, fun videos instead of just nonstop, doing the interview scene. We're going to try and make some creative stuff because I think that the type of information that we're trying to get out there, I can make it really dense. Some of the stuff that we talk about can be too dense for the average person that they'd be like, oh God, this is a snooze fest. Yeah. So we're going to try and take and boil this stuff down to like info memes that are video form where, we can make a joke, have a Michael Myers sitting there hacking somebody and say, wait a minute, did you hear about the deficit? Huh?
Oh,
So we're going to have some fun with this, I think. And, Peter, you do great imitations, so you keep it up, man. Make a name for yourself on TikTok, brother.
Well, one last thing before you go, my friend. Sure. We are having Andrew Yang on the podcast on Thursday. I actually think he may be on. I actually think he may be onto something. And the reason I say that is because if he is, again, it's under the condition that he doesn't take corporate special interest money. But if he was willing to commit to that, I actually do think that he is a good enough pitch man where he could attract a lot of attention because people are desperate to get away from the two-party duopoly. And you need to have somebody who is willing to put themselves out there in a way that is, kind of has, the name recognition. I see it this way. It's 3 things. You have to have credibility. You have to have the ability to raise money cleanly. And you have to have influencers, like people who want to be involved. And I look at somebody, as we were seeing recently, I look at somebody like a Joe Rogan or a Dave Chappelle or even a Marianne Williamson, who, if they joined up with somebody like Andrew, I think it could create a type of ripple effect where you could actually build something into something that could actually be sustainable. But again, it's all under the condition that corporate special interest money does not play a role in this venture. Any thoughts on?
I haven't seen him commit to that, so that's a big if.
But that's one thing that we will be pressing him on, and I would love to hear your thoughts about, because there's so much nihilism and disdain for the two-party duopoly. Where do you think this is going? It's probably not going to go anywhere in your mind, but I'm curious as to what you think.
Okay, so let me just say first and foremost, Andrew Yang may be a great dancer. He might even be a decent Parcheesi player. but he doesn't have anything politically for me at all.
Okay.
And I tried, couldn't do it. And I mean, the closest I ever came to that was Ross Perot back in the day. The giant sucking sound and all that good stuff. But Andrew Yang's ideological bend is libertarian. And I have 0% libertarian in me. I've checked, I couldn't find it. I went in my shoe, couldn't find it. I went in the lint tray, couldn't find it. 0% libertarian. And, the only libertarian aspect I have in me, I guess you could say, is civil rights. I mean, like I believe in civil liberties, and I don't want to see us policing each other. I don't want to bring about 1984. And that's about the beginning and the ending of my libertarian strain. I understand that we need to be able to do certain things with the federal government. I understand that we need to do certain things collectively. And you could say that I'm a big collectivist, and I'm not an individualist. And I don't believe, I was sitting there thinking about this the other day. Imagine the enormity of space. Imagine the enormity of just one of our oceans on this planet. And then imagine the enormity of just the township you live in. Okay. It's huge. Now imagine putting all the effort into life that you have to put into just to survive, and think about how we kick people down like it's their personal responsibility to be successful in this massive thing that you didn't have any say so in the economic system. You didn't have any say so in any of the rules and conditions, really. You were born into it, and now you're expected to succeed. And I think that that's a really cruel paradigm. The more I think about it, the worse I get. So you could say, I don't look for individual solutions. Hey, you go out there and you figure it out yourself. Hey, you go out there and make the best choices possible. I don't have personally, and I do a lot of reading, I don't have enough of the knowledge, if you will, or connecting points to make some decisions that I think really are fundamental in being successful in the society. And Yang's perspectives, unfortunately, in my mind, here's $1,000, go make some great decisions. And I have a real problem with that. Very much feels like bootstrapping to me. Very much feels like what we're doing now on steroids to me. And he's just not my cup of tea. Now, do I want to have a vanguard party out there? Yes, but I want a real leftist vanguard party, not a libertarian one. We need to come together, not find ways to be strong on our own. It's too much going on right now for us to be a bunch of rugged individualists. That's my take.
I think it's a great take, and again, I do have libertarian principles, but you can't run a society in this idea of survival of the fittest. It cannot work because not everybody is constructed the same. And I think that there's an argument to be made to just follow the model of the Northern European countries, basically a hybrid system of capitalism and socialism. And if people can't understand that you have to have a wide social safety net coupled with a free market system, it can't succeed. You're seeing it fall apart here in the States. And so
we say it all the time that certain things cannot be for profit. So it's which industries are and are not for profit is the biggest issue. I mean, healthcare, corrections, education, they're things that should not be for profit. And widgets and gadgets and gizmos should be for all the profit people want. So I have no problem with capitalism. It just can't be something that runs our important social functions. And I think that's the distinction.
And that's why we have to keep having these conversations. And as we have said many times before, you have an open invitation to return whenever you like. If you ever want to have us on, we'll be right there. Guys, check it out. Steve Grumbine, Real Progressives, Real Progress in Action. Of course, the Macro and Cheese podcast.
Macro and Cheese podcast.
Absolutely. And of course, thank you, MMTers, for joining us today and your amazing support. Steve, we look forward to talking with you again soon, brother.
Thank you both very much. Have a great day.
You too, man.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Always fun, right?
Oh, yeah. I love Steve.
So as you guys know, we also have a candidate segment, and this one is very important because it is for an open seat. As you guys know, our congressional representative in the Tampa Bay region, Charlie Crist, is running for governor, and as is the law, he has to give up his seat. So we have an open congressional seat in Congressional District 13 in the state of Florida, and the lovely lady who is coming into the studio now is running for that seat She is Jen. Forgive me, I don't have it in front of me right now. She is a state house representative.
She is. We're gonna get that because there's no. I can barely remember our congressional district, so I'm not going to remember what number she is. But she is. She is a Florida state. Like she's a state legislator. She's already a state legislator.
And again, it's going to be very interesting. And the lovely lady's name is Michelle Rayner. It's going to be very interesting to hear her thoughts because, as you know, we have had on great friend of the show, Amari Hardy, who is running for the U.S. Congress as we speak. And he talks about at length the problems that the Democrats have up in Tallahassee. I
can't imagine anything else. Like to me, the idea of being a Democrat in Tallahassee, I'd rather have a root canal. Well, like I honestly do not see how it's talk about bailing water out of a sinking ship feeling.
Well, she represents District 70, which is Hillsborough, Pinellas, Hillsborough, Manatee, and Sarasota counties. So she has a lovely slice that basically covers that area in the Tampa Bay region.
Okay.
Welcome to Generational Change, Michelle Rayner Goolsby. Did I say it right?
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. How are you?
I'm doing great. You're lovely. Welcome.
Thanks so much for having me, y'all. Appreciate being here.
Absolutely.
So talk. Okay, yeah. You go, Peter, because no, this is definitely you are way more knowledgeable about districts. Like I couldn't even tell you my own, like I know who my representatives, but I don't know what my number is.
Gotcha. Who's your representative?
Gottlieb. I'm Gottlieb.
Okay, yeah, I don't know. 98 maybe, I think.
That sounds about right. Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, there you go.
And of course, it is very difficult, to serve in Tallahassee. So I think that's a great place to start, Michelle. What your experience has been like. Because like I said, we've had Representative Hardy on. He talks about, obviously all the roadblocks that the Democratic Party faces up in Tallahassee. We are a very regional party in this state. And that, of course, is probably the biggest reason why we don't get anywhere. Your thoughts on what the experience has been like serving at the state house level and how that may ultimately
as a Democrat.
Yeah. And how that could ultimately translate running at the federal level.
Yeah. So, well, once again, thanks guys for having me on. So I am friends with Rep Hardy. He is a good friend of mine. And yeah, I mean, it is difficult. I think that we see that Tallahassee's broken, but I think that we see that a lot of state governments throughout the country, they are broken as well. And so for me, it came down to doing the most good. And really, it was really a conversation that I had with my mother. Folks who may not know, my parents, lived through the Jim Crow South. My mom and my dad integrated the University of South Florida. And we talked a lot about having, kind of being in a moment where we have to decide who we're going to be. And we know that in the 60s and 70s when, state government, wasn't going to do what's right, as far as like ending segregation and abortion and, women's ability to vote, that the federal government had to step in. And I think right now we're at a time where the federal government has to step in, and we can have a deeper conversation about that in a minute. But I think it is hard in Tallahassee. I tell people, I had another Democrat actually who is supporting one of my other opponents say, well, you're just abandoning ship. I said, no, I'm absolutely not abandoning ship. What it is that if I'm going to be away from my family for X amount of time, I'm going to be away to get real work done. And I think right now we're in a moment that we have to decide, like I said, who we're going to be. And we have to make sure that we're sending the best up there to fight. And I think right now Tallahassee is so far gone. We have these ideas that we're going to flip the state blue in 22.
We have been trying to prepare people.
We have.
Not for Governor DeSantis, but for President DeSantis.
President DeSantis.
And here's the thing: as much as I would love to want that to happen, and I'm going to be supporting whoever the nominees are, and all of those things of that nature, I think we have to be really honest about where we're at. We don't have the math, as my dear friend Representative Travaris McCurdy says. The math is not mathing. We don't have the math, and also we don't have the maps. We don't have the maps. We don't have the ability to control where the maps are, and we understand that the Republicans, especially in this state, have never given us a reason to trust anything that they say, have never given a reason for us to believe that when they say they're going to be fair and honest and truthful, that they are actually going to do those things, because we've seen time and time again that they have not done that. So, it's something, and it's very sad because I was born and raised in Florida, was born and raised in Pinellas County, and for me, I know that we can be better because I know people who are like, WTF, what's happening? And and that's what's really, just kind of really just like heartbreaking about a lot of what we're seeing.
I have a question for you, though. No, this is completely off the thing, but were either of your parents in the psychology department at USF at that time? Did either of them do that?
I want to say maybe my mother, because my mom has her master. She's a social worker, so she has her master's in human services. And I remember us talking about psychology, and it was actually one of her Jewish professors that would walk with her to class.
Let me ask you, was his name Jack Sandler?
I can ask my mom.
Because that's my uncle. But what's interesting is that he was head of the psych department during those years. So when you talk about people that would be fighting on the correct side of things, he would be one of those people at that school.
He would tell me. I don't know. I'll ask her, Jack.
So I'm just curious. And yes, he would be her Jewish professor. He would be her Jewish professor.
Yeah, and she would tell me it was the Jewish professors, and she was in the psychology program that would actually walk her to class.
Yeah.
All of those kinds of things. That's so. Come on, this small ass world.
Yeah. Well, it's old Florida because, you're born and raised here. I'm second generation, so I'm down here, but my aunt and uncle were down here. And then he took the professorship up at USF and moved up to Tampa, which at the time was, my aunt was livid. She's a Jew from Miami Beach. And she's like, Tampa, and then they ended up living in Lutz. And my aunt was like, all I want is a Burdines. She was just losing it, old back in the day when Lutz was.
This had to go to Clearwater at that time for a Burdines. That was the only place where a Burdines
this was her gripe.
Yes, understood.
So you understand, right? Now it's not like that. I would like to say Tampa has come a long way. Even Lutz has come a really long 100%. Way. But talk. All right, I'm sorry, Peter. Go. You have important things to talk about.
It'll stay right here. So what did you want to say?
No, I was just going to say, when you first got to Tallahassee, obviously when you ran, you were thinking, this is good. We're going to get in there. We're going to fight the fight. We're going to fight the Republicans. And it's sad to me to see that your firsthand experience is basically confirming and validating what I've suspected to be true, which is Tallahassee is a lost cause.
At this point, it was interesting. I'll share this with you. I was asked to recruit Black women to run for certain seats in the state house. And I feel like, anyone who knows me knows how I feel about Black women. I also was going to be very honest and transparent about my experience. I, was like, I can't just tell someone you need to run. And then they're like, how is it? And there's a video of me crying on the House floor 2 days later because of the bills that are being passed. And so I talked about how it can be violent, and especially to people of color, especially to LGBTQ folks, especially to women, especially to anyone that's not a white, cis, heterosexual man, right? Republican man, right? And I got reprimanded by folks. Don't tell people that, we need them to. I was like, no, I think you need to tell people the truth, that if they want to run, it's noble and it's amazing and we need good people, but you need to let people know what they're walking into. We need to let people know this is really what we're dealing with, because I think when you let people know what we're dealing with, we understand the urgency of the moment. We understand oh, okay, this is not just it's Tallahassee and it's bad and Republicans control it, but really what we're dealing with here in the state of Florida. And I think that if people had a real understanding about that and kind of the uckiness and the grossness of some of the legislation and all of the things in these backroom deals, that there would be more of an urgency, hopefully more of an urgency in the Democratic Party to make sure that we're doing everything that we can. Because guess what, y'all, as much as we we want to say, oh, we cannot organize them and the Democrats cannot organize, you cannot organize systemic voter suppression. You can't do that. You cannot organize institutional racism. You can't do that. Like, you cannot organize, homophobia and misogyny and all of those things. So we have to have a party that's very real and clear about what's happening in Tallahassee. And then we have an urgency behind actually doing a strategy that's for real, that we can not only flip the state, but make sure that we have good folks in office.
That is a great segue to the lovely lady who we were hoping was going to run for governor, but probably thought better of it and will do it at a later date. And that, of course, is Anna Eskamani.
Our friend Anna Eskamani.
My friend, yes.
Really made a hell of a difference. And I do think that what she is doing is very smart. She is really doing what is necessary, but we need a bunch of the Anna Eskamanis, if you will, to be duplicated all throughout the state. The infrastructure in many ways is what needs to change. And that's something that I think is a very good segue into what we believe. And it's one of the reasons why our show is called Generational Change. There is, with all due respect, at least a generation's worth of Democrats that simply don't want to pass the baton. They do not want to change things. They do not want to see evolution happen. We're not going to talk about her. You know who our congressional representative is in Broward. That's one of several. We really have this problem of the evolution of the party that must happen, because if it doesn't happen, Florida is not going to be a shade of red state. It is a red state, and it will only get worse. So your thoughts on the evolution of the party at this, just overall in terms of the state level infrastructure that has to change?
I mean, I think that you're absolutely right. I mean, for me, even running in this race, I was told to wait my turn. I was told, who do you think you are? And this is by former electeds. I walked into a fundraiser, and before I could even say hello, one particular person was like, "I'm team such and such," and I'm like, "Hi, how are you? I'm well. Good to see you. I'm doing well. Like, did you get here safely? Like, you're not, being affected by the pandemic." And so that's the attitude. I am a Black queer woman who's a civil rights attorney who has the audacity to be out and proud, who has the audacity to be a woman of size, who has the audacity to say what's on her mind. And that is scary. And I think that because, and I'm going to say this, and I know probably some of my team is like, oh God, but I'm going to say
it.
So because we understand that there is a portion of our party that needs to have systemic racism, that needs to have proximity to white supremacy, that needs to have proximity to even Republicans in order to maintain power. There is not everybody, but there is a portion of our party. There are some folks within our party that is how they thrive. We've seen articles that have talked about this dark money that's been funneling through the party. And then some of those same people are running, campaigns and House Victory and all of those things. So to me, until we get real serious about having a real conversation about it. And that's why I appreciate the work that Anna Eskamani is doing. But there are Black women that have been doing this work for a long time. Folks like Jasmine Burney Clark, folks like Jasmine Rogers and Maya Brown and Tessa and all those other I like that hashtag.
That's good.
All these other folks that have been doing this work and who were even in 2020 during the primary and the general election sounding the alarm that we are in trouble. But because we're not having those real conversations and we're not, uplifting voices of folks who are in the communities that need us the most, we're just like, oh, well, we're just going to kind of keep things the same way. We have folks developing 67 county strategies. We're not going to do that. We're just going to, let, some consultant from somewhere else who's never lived in Florida, come and tell us what to do. And that's the frustrating part.
Yeah.
And that's why you're seeing folks like Anna Eskamani or folks like Jasmine Burney Clark or folks like who are members of the Alliance saying, like, listen, if the establishment's not going to listen to us and they're not going to actually give us the resources, we will organize outside of you.
Yeah, it's a huge problem, the difference in the people that are actually leading the party versus the people that would better represent the party. And look, nothing is plainer than the fact that the party essentially has a Republican in charge of it right now at the state level. We know why that person was placed there. We know who put that person there. We know where the money comes from. And so you definitely strike me as someone I've been to, and I'm sure you've been to the state events, and they're always sponsored by things like Walmart and Big Sugar, which should not be something that you're seeing at a Democratic convention at the state party level, but we do. And until they stop being in bed with all the same corporations that the Republicans are in bed with, they're all serving the same master. So we, as people that are non-corporate people or that are stuck in that party, are sort of like flailing around trying to figure out, well, what do we do? Because the party doesn't really represent us, but yet that's the party we're in. And we're just sort of stuck. And this is why I personally will not give any money to the state party, because they're taking money from corporate special interests. And we pride ourselves here on not doing that. So if I were to support them, then I've got people supporting me based on us trying to transform politics into service. But then my money is going to a state party that takes corporate money. So we need to get rid of that as our party and actually be a real, like, that's the only way this is going to change.
I know, I 100% agree. And I was actually texting with a good friend of mine, Congressman Mondaire Jones, and we were having a conversation about corporate money. And, and he was like, people take this corporate money and not realizing that even when you're thinking about in these races, it doesn't make that big of a difference, because it's really the grassroots people that really funnel it. And then I know for me, for example, it has been progressive organizations like Way to Lead, DFA, other organizations that have, kind of gotten my message out as well. And then just people knowing me in the community. And, I think for me, that is different. The difference between me and even my primary opponents that, I first off, like, I'm just going to be like, and there's like, y'all, there's no other way I can be just but me. First of all, I'm not in love with being elected. That some people are like, well, the next thing for me is like, I'm going to do this, and that. I'm literally a woman on this mission. I'm a woman that is about, I'm going to give y'all maybe a good 10 years in Congress, if that. I want to build a bench that's real, build a bench that has folks that look like me, that move like me, that show up like me. And that are able to come along. This is not about a dynasty. This is not about because, my grandfather was, in Congress, or I worked for Obama, or all of those things that some of my other primary opponents are touting. It is literally, we're in a moment where we have to decide who we're going to be. We're in a moment where we have to make sure that we have folks who can fight. And that's the work that I've done. And so for me, it is very frustrating when I read articles and I'm reading that, people are out here screaming, people over profits and all of these kinds of things, but they're taking dark money. It is frustrating because, and then you wonder why our party is still the same. And not just even on the state level, but even on a national level. You have Kristen Sinema, who's literally holding things up because she's going to get a check from pharmaceutical. It just doesn't have to be this way. It literally doesn't have to be this way. And it is about when you are serving people, it is about that service. And it's highly frustrating.
You were the first person I've heard talk about getting that job. The job of being in Congress, as I always sort of talked about it. It's so funny. No, I've never heard any other candidate talk about it in the same way. Like, that's exactly how I felt about it. Like, I do not want to be here. I do not want to be doing this, but unfortunately I can, and it's a privilege that I can do so. And so I'm willing to do this, but this is not a life for me. Like that's really, and I think people need to support those candidates. I do.
Thank you.
I think that's the most important thing. What does your primary field look like?
So right now it's myself, and it is State Representative Ben Diamond, who represents the district over from me, District 68. And it is Eric Lynn. He's a former Obama administration official. So it's right now it's, two white men and myself. And
well, good. Let it stay that way.
That could actually be a pretty big advantage to you.
No, I think it is. I do. I think demographically, it's unfortunate that we have to have these strategic conversations about demographics, but the reality is it matters. We know that in our district that having a Jewish last name helps. We know that in Miami-Dade, if you have a Latino surname, you have a better chance. And that's just the reality. You know what I mean? So it's unfortunate, but it's true. And the fact that you're running against two white sounding milquetoast sounding people sounds like that is an advantage for you.
Yeah, and and here's the thing: I have nothing bad to say about them. They're great people in their own right. And they're running for whatever reasons that they believe that they should run. But for me, like I said, this is really, I think, just we're in a defining moment, and I will tell you the reason I even ran for my House seat. Attorney Ben Crump was like, "So there's a seat that's open." I'm like, really. But then as I kind of was looking at the field, I was like, is this who the people have to choose from? And that's why I got into this race as well. Is this who the people have to choose from? Things that we've already had, things that have already been the same, or so maybe someone like myself who's more representative of our district, more representative of our community, and really more representative where I think that our country wants to go and needs to go, but for some of these forces that we talked about earlier. And that's why I got in, and I really believe that we have a message that can transcend. And I think that when you think of Black candidates, I was told, well, this is a primarily white district, or you're a Black woman, what do you think? But we're seeing Black and brown, candidates not only being able to run, but to win in areas where they, traditionally haven't been able to win. And I think that, you have to really think about, when you're thinking about that, it's that we have stories that are able to transcend race, able to transcend gender, able to transcend gender identity, all of those things. And so that's sort of the things that, kind of I was thinking about, even when we're talking about the strategic part of like, does this make sense to run?
Well, yeah. And a lot of people don't. Peter and I talk about that all the time. Like, people don't think it through. They only think, oh, I want this. They don't really think, am I right for it? Is the district right? Like, there is a thought process that has to go into this. And I think you're right. And I think that you are the perfect person for that job.
And the last thing to conclude with, Michelle, and guys, michelleforflorida.com, please check it out. Remember,
share the love.
Phone banking, text banking, donating. And if you are in the I-4 corridor area, Orlando Metro, Tampa, Sarasota, even Fort Myers, head on up. Door knocking is essential. That is how you're going to win a primary like this.
I might even come knock doors for you.
Please, I will welcome.
I might even come knock doors for you. And guys, but in all fairness, Florida's primary is August, and so it definitely doesn't get the priority status. Like, we have to go in chronological order of priority. But I think you're awesome, so I appreciate you coming on very much.
And Michelle, just so we know, because this is a seat that Charlie Crist is vacating, so is this is there going to be a special election? How is this going to work?
So I'm finishing my entire term in the state house. And then so instead of just refiling for my state house seat, I filed for Congress. So it'll be a regular primary in August 2022 and then the general in November.
If you can talk about, lastly, we talk about all the time. One of the things that, we obviously know, again, like I said, we don't have to get into our Congresswoman. We know what the issues are there. Talk about the power of the federal seat and what that could mean in terms of building local infrastructure. There is so much power that the federal seat provides you with that we don't see anybody really take advantage of. But if you want to make sure, Broward County, the fourth bluest county based on population in the United States, we have not made quorum with the DEC in over 4 years. As far as I'm concerned, that's just a reflection of bad leadership and bad organizing. But if somebody who had the power of a federal seat was actually working to build that infrastructure, let's say in Pinellas, in Hillsborough, and so on, if you could talk about the impact that you would be looking to make in terms of changing that infrastructure at the state level in Florida, that is something that never really gets talked about, but I think is immensely important. Your thoughts on that?
100%. And that's kind of to the point that I said about building a bench. So for me, it really comes down to continuing the work that I'm already doing, because really this is like literally, and I know, like Candace said, it's not about me, but it really is not about me. It really is making sure that not only our local party is empowered, but local candidates are empowered, that we're building political power that is diverse. We're building political power that looks and is representative representative of the communities in which we live, making sure that we're sending, not just like, oh, well, it's a Democrat in name only, but a Democrat that actually is working for, progressive values to Tallahassee. Also, I think that to me, when we're even thinking about voting, and this is the thing that's so frustrating about the federal government, before we can even get to all the things we want to see, we got to be able to vote, y'all. We got to be able to make sure we can access the ballot. And when I talk about who we're going to be, and we have to make that decision about who we're going to be, we have to make the decision of we're going to be a nation that's going to obstruct people's access to the ballot, that's going to suppress the vote, or if we're going to finally, once and for all, allow unobstructed access to the ballot. Because if we don't have that unobstructed access to the ballot, I can start building the bench and doing all these things that I want to do, but the people can't vote. The people can't vote.
Yeah.
They can't vote. And so that's the thing. We can talk about a woman's right to choose and racial justice and equity and all of those things that we really dream of. But if people can't even get to the doggone ballot and vote and know that their vote is going to count and know that like some maniac is not going to be out here screaming, this, that, and the third, this is a rigged election, which is so funny to hear white folks say it's rigged election. I mean, like, can we have that conversation, right?
That's rich. That's
let's
funny.
Let's talk about redlining and blockbusting and all the other.
Right, when you see white men talking about fixed elections, it is really funny.
It is hilarious. I'm like, yo, we're really gonna have this conversation. And I remember I went on like my Facebook memories, and apparently I had did a Facebook status like 4 or 5 years ago, and I'm like, still rich, still here. We're still here. But no, I mean, I think that those are the things that are important, and that's why I'm running. I mean, I am, like I said, I'm on a mission. I'm really believe that the values that we have talked about and the values that y'all talk about, they're not just like a pie in the sky. Yes, we have to be practical about how we can get things done. I get it. Like we have to work with people and all of those things. Like I get that. I have worked with Republicans. I have passed bills with Republicans. That's why I've been able to get things done in Tallahassee. But I also believe that we have to make sure that we are swinging for the fences, because that world that we believe to be equitable and folks can thrive actually can happen. We just have to have the political will. And I'll leave you with this. My same friend, Congressman Mondaire Jones, he tweeted this, and it like stabbed me in the heart. He said, for the cost of one aircraft carrier, we could eliminate homelessness in the United States. And it brings me to tears. I get choked up because it's like, we literally just have to have the political will to do what's right and to do what's honorable and to do the things that can help folks. And it's like, it's not hard. It doesn't have to be this way. And that to me is like, so you're telling me we could forego buying one aircraft carrier to make sure that people have safe housing, environmentally sound housing. Got it. Cool.
Yeah. Well, and you can look no further than those fighter jet graveyards that are out there in the western part of this country in these undisclosed locations where you've got football field length size of never used fighter jets that we built and paid companies and contractors to build, but they never even got put into use. Yeah. The waste is absurd. So, you could find it anywhere, and yet pretty much all roads lead to the military industrial complex. We are definitely grateful that you came on today.
Thank you.
And you are not a politician. You are a public servant. And
we say that as in the best possible. And
that's what people should be striving to do. And that is what we are hoping becomes more of the consensus, as you say, the generational change that needs to happen. And you exemplify that, Michelle. Guys, MichelleForFlorida.com. Please check it out. Give her a hand. And of course, it looks like we'll be heading up to the Tampa area at some point to help you knock on some.
I always like an excuse to go visit the fam.
There you go.
Come on. All right, take care, y'all.
Thanks, Michelle.
Have a great day, Michelle.
Bye.
Thank you. That was that was chipper. That was fun.
She's great.
She is. She's got.
She's the kind of people we need.
She's got.
And it does sort of make me sad that she won't be in Tallahassee anymore. But then I kind of get that too.
But she's got the right disposition, and you can tell that her intentions for serving are based on, this isn't about me. This is about we've got to do something. And she recognized. And again, so when somebody says, why why give up the seat in Tallahassee? The answer is because we don't have enough infrastructure in place to actually make an impact. If I had the power of the federal seat, with all due respect to Representative Christ, she would be making a hell of a bigger impact in terms of building that bench, much as would be the case if you were representing South Florida instead of Wasserman Schultz. There is this whole idea,
yeah.
you know,
I mean, when you're
that
talking
stage.
Charlie Crist, he's pretty centrist, milquetoast establishment, you know. And
He's a former Republican governor,
Yeah,
but he's a
no,
Democrat now, so all is forgiven.
which
It's
actually puts him perfectly in sync with the head of our party.
Doesn't it really, in a way, just kind of, when you have a really objective eye to how this works and you take a step back and you watch the mental gymnastics that people have to put themselves through to justify why they support this, that, and the other thing, it's kind of interesting. It really is. And now we're going to have to hopefully figure out a way to get Representative Jones to come on the podcast, which I think would be
that would be great. And I also would like to reach out to Jamal and see if we can get him.
Well, those are two peas in the pod. Those two districts literally are connected to each other. So hopefully where there's one, there will be the other. We will do our best to make that happen. But as a conclusion to our lovely podcast Sundays, and this is getting good. It looks like
for anybody who still hangs out and wants to hear the Focus on Florida segment, we have some good Florida stories.
We certainly do. So Jen, why don't you take the first one? So for a lot of people who do not understand, you know, we are.
Oh, you want to go left to right? You want to go
well, you know what?
I mean, I don't care.
You know, we could go. I tell you what, we could go right to left.
Because I have the redistricting information, and still, it's not completely clear how it's going to go yet. They haven't drawn the lines.
So this is, again, there are many reasons as to why Jen is not running again in 2022. 2024 could be another story. But for the time being, there are way too many variables that are up in the air. If you guys haven't noticed, we have a state house race, 3 state house races that the Florida GOP still has not scheduled so that they can have their special election. And that's on top of the fact that we are going through the once a decade redistricting. And we are getting another congressional district. We all know it's going to be somewhere in the I-4 corridor area because that's where the biggest influx of population is.
But do you know which county looks to get broken up in the worst way?
Yes. Is it Osceola County? No, it's somewhere.
It's Leon, I believe.
Leon.
And so so this is where it's being like anticipated that the largely Democratic county that's represented in the Florida House by Allison Tant could be broken up with a shift towards more Republican line communities. It's going to cut up Leon County. And either way, apparently any way you move that district is going to affect it, no matter what direction they move. So it sounds like it's pretty inevitable that that's going to happen up there. And then there's going to be another person. We're going to go from having 27 congressional representatives to 28. And the new district will be somewhere in the I-4 corridor.
Yeah, and the GOP is anticipating that they're getting it, and they probably will.
Yeah. Well, look, all they have to do is move a few lines around. So why, you know.
That's true. Well, Anthony Sabatini, who is the biggest trumper of them all in the state of Florida, he's got his sights set on getting to Capitol Hill. So, you know, we'll see what ultimately ends up happening there.
But again, guys, keep your eyes on Leon County and Allison Tant's seat.
Just as the lovely Mrs. Rayner just brought to our attention, you know, because we do not have a bench and we do not have any type of a legitimate infrastructure, which has a lot to do with the way the party currently stands, we don't have any way of stopping this continued gerrymandering, the problems that exist. If we had a more diversified portfolio, if you will, this would be much less of a problem. So, of course, now it leads into what is going on, the latest that's going on with Governor DeSantis. And of course, as we have said many times before, and one of the reasons why I do believe he's the next president is because he will never bite off more than he can chew. He will do these absolutely obnoxious, ridiculous fights to throw red meat to the most hardened members of the base, kind of like the lady that I spoke to last night. But right now, he recognizes, or his team recognizes, that debt collections for unemployment overpayments can't actually stand. So he is suspending it indefinitely. And why is he doing that? Because he knows that this is an area where if he were to allow it to continue would hurt him politically. and he's not going to do that. He knows where his bread's buttered, and he knows exactly what he needs to do. Is this a good thing? Absolutely, it's a good thing. Should it even be a conversation to be had? Of course not. But in the country we live in, and in the state we live in, of course we have to have this. Many people suffer for the mites of the very wealthy and privileged that I'm surrounded by here in Naples. But how else could they live such a good, privileged life if they weren't exploiting somebody along the way? Just as I say, you can't be a billionaire unless you're exploiting a hell of a lot of people. And that's certainly something that seems to happen. But with our governor, again, he is not going to do anything that is going to put his potential aspirations, not just for re-election as governor, but for his aspirations to run for president in peril. So he's doing what he needs to do. This is a good thing, regardless of what anybody else is going to say. But again,
but let's be very clear that this does not apply to fraudulent overpayments, which to me is, well, I except for I don't understand what determines whether something is then fraudulent. Because if you're talking about it, overpayment and overpayment.
Well, we know of a story like that happened recently, and we'll leave it at that. There was a lot of fraud that took place during the pandemic. And like any political system and economic system that is cratering and has a lot of problems, you're going to have fraud. And in some cases, a lot of it. But there's infinitely more people that are just struggling to get by.
Yes.
And the more this insanity of gridlock happens on Capitol Hill, it's only going to get worse. And that's why the temptation to look for other options like the Forward Party, regardless of what people's opinion may be of the initial stages and who may be leading it, there is this appeal of, well, give me something else. People wanted something else. They got Donald Trump. So don't tell me it can't happen, because we're getting really tired of this crap. And no more is that evident with the fact that we have a teacher shortage in the state of Florida.
Yes, we do.
5,000, give or take a few. And of course,
well, and by the way, there are also more than 4,000 openings for other school staff positions.
Yeah.
So it's not just under teacher staffed, it's just understaffed in general by close to 10,000 people in the state, which is really big. The shortage has worsened since the start of the school year. The vacancies are out of control. These numbers and trends are an alarm bell going off for our public schools, and state officials need to start listening. That's basically the gist.
I agree. And again, the teachers union is very powerful. At the tippy top, unfortunately, what they fight for from a political standpoint, economic standpoint, is something that we are very juxtaposed to. But we are huge supporters of teachers, huge supporters of teachers' right to collectively bargain. Again, we are a right to work state, so teachers suffer mightily in that regard.
Well, look, I mean, let me tell you the numbers, though. So the vacancies from August 2020 to August 21 have increased 67%.
There you go. And again,
and some of it is COVID related, but it isn't all COVID related.
No, but COVID is merely peeling the mask off of what's really going on.
Apparently, the issue is really a pay issue. And people who know Florida, I think we rank 48th in education in the country. So we're really
great. Ain't that great?
There's nothing to be proud of. And so the pay is a huge issue. Oh, here, Florida average salary for teachers in Florida ranks 49th. More than $10,000 less than the national average.
And this is a state with no state income tax.
And this is a state that is a huge cost of living.
Of course. And again, what do you usually get when you have no state income tax? You have sales tax and property tax. And Florida is the #1 state in the country for income inequality. So essentially, if you are living in a wealthy area in Florida, you're fine. But there's only so many of them, and there's a hell of a lot more that are not. And the school systems suffer mightily for it because property taxes are what ultimately determine the level of, excellence, if you want to call it, of our state school system.
It's unfortunate. We obviously don't respect our teachers in this state.
No.
They just don't. I don't care. If you are somebody that is in a power position in Tallahassee, you clearly do not care about teachers.
Imagine living in a town like Margate and busing your children up to Boca Raton just to have them in the Boca school system.
Well, that's harder and harder to do. And now that's even considered a felony if you lie about your address, because they've made that really hard. But it turns out that one of the categories that is really lacking in staffing are bus drivers. So that's probably also causing a problem for a lot of people.
Yet again, another reason why we support a living wage. Everybody has a role to play. And this idea that you should not be justly compensated for your work. You need school bus drivers. I don't care if you think it's a job that isn't glamorous or worthy of your approval. It's
I can't
necessary.
fathom how hard that would be to drive a school bus with the
It
nonsense
ain't easy.
going on the bus.
You
No,
need a CDC license. Are you kidding? And
the
it's
kids
even
are
more.
brutal, and the kids are brutal.
Kids are not only brutal, but your responsibility is tenfold because you have kids on the bus.
Yeah.
So, needless to say, the system is cratering because we don't value the basic needs of those that are doing the jobs that are just as important as anything else, even if it isn't generating revenue, because that's all they think about is what's generating revenue. And that's not going to work. Another thing we could talk about with Andrew on Thursday. And so one of the last stories we've got is Florida Task Force makes recommendations on condo safety. Now, we have said time and again that as soon as the tragedy happened in Surfside, we had been going to commission meetings, and essentially the only thing they would ever talk about is the fact that saltwater erosion was happening on the buildings, and that this is a serious problem, and that eventually something catastrophic was going to happen. And of course, the city commission at that time sat idly by. The city commission is much different now. But this was a preventable problem.
So I just want to be clear that this particular task force, this is a civil situation. This is not about finding blame or allocating, like finding liability. The real property, probate, and trust law section of the Florida Bar Association is what formed this task force, bringing together lawyers specializing in condo association law. I have a feeling I probably know the majority of people on that panel. But the lack of uniform, this is a quote from the report was 179 pages. And a quote from that I think speaks a lot is the lack of uniform maintenance standards or protocols and the unguided discretion given to boards of directors to determine when, how, and if life safety inspections should be performed requires legislative intervention. And that's true. But I would also add, and this is something that just because I know it, that even if, let's look at Champlain Towers, which was the building that collapsed in Surfside, even if they wanted their inspection and they were on time and they wanted to set it up, they couldn't afford to pay for it, even if they wanted to. And that's a huge problem. And that's where we're going to have federal intervention. This has to be part of an infrastructure overhaul, because every association on the beach, and we'll just to give you an idea, 912,376 Florida condo units housing more than 2 million people are at least 30 years old, including more than 105,000 older than 50 and nearly 328,000 built between 40 and 50 years ago. So overall, we have more than 1.5 million condo units operated by 27,599 condo associations. And one of the recommendations is giving association boards the right to make special assessments for major repairs to protect resident safety without full association vote. Again, I reiterate, these are nice rules, but if there's no money, there's no money. And if you're going to try to give somebody who owns, let's say, a one-bedroom condo, a $300,000 assessment, which would probably put them like underwater in their condo, it's just not going to happen that way. So I think that this is the problem. Is like you can make all the rules, but it doesn't make the money appear. That's my concern about it.
And again, I still think there's a lot of people who really don't get it and really don't see it. And yes, even my father, I even said to him, so how long do you think this area is going to be habitable by the water here? And he's like, oh, about 100 years.
So here, the report also recommends allowing condominium boards to borrow money to pay for life safety repairs, so the cost can be spread out over years. The problem with that is they will be underwater over years. Like there aren't years to be spreading it out over. I don't understand how people can get a 30-year mortgage anymore on the beach. I don't understand how that could even happen. So.
I don't either. And of course, but again, it's a question of our government, as we keep saying, is completely captured by corporate special interests.
Yeah, but again,
Yeah,
look,
man.
and again, they have the best intentions. This is a task force that got together to say what could be done legislatively to basically create a scenario where condo associations and boards can impose the necessary repairs that they need to make, and to ease that path.
Yep.
But obviously, this doesn't address the larger issue, which is the money. So I think that they're thinking about this just from the legislative standpoint.
Well, maybe that's
cool.
something that could be in the reconciliation package. You never know. So,
Well, it needs
we'll
to,
see.
because it's the only way that we're going to have it handled is through an infrastructure.
I just won't be investing on the
No,
won't be
no.
doing that.
And so lastly, in the world of AYFKM, and I do here we go.
Are you effing kidding me?
Are you effing kidding me? So apparently, the Seminole tribe of Florida is making a push to get back the remains of their ancestors, which are currently in the possession of the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History. I think this is, so I'm going to read this quote because I think it's interesting, like that we should even be having this discussion. This is from Tina Marie Osceola. She is a Seminole tribe member. To think that we have to validate why it's important that we have our ancestors put back where they came from and where they were initially buried is completely inhumane. I tend to agree. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that people are having to even go through channels to do this. I just, it's so, this would not happen to white people. Like, this isn't something that would happen to white people. This is something that happens to groups of people that we consider, that white supremacy considers lesser. So they're not entitled to have that, what they want. Their remains are our remains. Everything that's theirs is ours. What's ours is ours, and what's theirs is ours. And this is just really, very telling. So the Florida Seminole tribe is requesting the remains of 1,492 of their ancestors be returned to them.
I wonder why they picked that number.
The remains were found in ancient villages and burial sites all across Florida. They were collected by a number of individuals, by many Smithsonian-sponsored excavations. The tribe's claim was done under the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act from 1990. The law protects the cultural and biological remains of Native Americans and their ancestors that required us to return human remains and funerary objects to culturally affiliated, federally recognized tribes. So why is this a problem? Why can't you just send them their people back?
That's a good point.
So it's going to be a lengthy process. Unfortunately, this isn't, archaeologists for a long time treated human remains the same as they did any other artifact. And that's kind of the problem here. And I think that really goes to what I was saying before, that this is lesser. This was not considered people. This was considered relics and artifacts. Yeah. And anyway, this just came up and I'm like, that's just nuts that you would have to be like jumping through hoops to get your people back that were improperly robbed from graves. Like, which by the way, is also against the law to just grave rob. It's actually a felony.
Well, again, you saw the mass grave that was discovered up in Canada.
Yeah.
The amount of Native American blood that has been spilt in this country in the name of, European colonizing is, there are people who simply don't want to accept their trajectory in history and how they got where they got, and how there are distinct advantages, to being of the white race and, different things. It's not that you as a person are bad. It's just recognizing that the infrastructure that has been built is faulty, and that needs to change.
What do we have coming up? What do we have coming up? We have a big thing.
Speaking of changing infrastructure, we have none other than Andrew Yang, who will be joining us on Thursday to talk about his path towards a new political party, which I happen to think could actually work. And I will give my thoughts on that on Thursday when he comes.
I have very mixed thoughts on it, but the reality is that I'm supportive of people that are trying to do things to help other people and are trying to be a positive. And it's hard because from a strategic standpoint, like I get where Steve is coming from as well. Like I get what people are saying. And if Andrew is non-committal about not taking corporate money, that's a problem for me.
Exactly.
But, if this is something that could be a labor-oriented type of, movement, then I'm all for it.
I agree, and that is what we are going to harp on. We also think there are certain strategies that he could employ that, would obviously work because people are desperate for something else. And if you think we're wrong, again, Donald Trump became president of the United States, and without a global pandemic, he would have easily been reelected. So let's keep things in perspective here.
So we will be back on Thursday night week.
Last Thursday, because this was planned well in advance.
Yeah, so we will be Thursday night. We won't be Wednesday night.
Yep. And we are also going to have a Humanity Forward candidate, Erica Rhodes, who's running for Congress in California's 30th district. So it's going to be the perfect show. We're going to have a lot of interesting topics to discuss. We hope you all enjoyed it today. A really good transition from MMT to UBI and a lot more. And then next Sunday, we will have Kim Iverson, and that will be an interesting conversation. And then the following Wednesday, Jen is having on somebody that she was really looking forward to having on for a couple of weeks now, and that is Sam from Reset Race.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yes. So we've definitely got a packed schedule coming up. We're looking forward to it. We hope you guys are all doing well this Sunday. Go enjoy some football, and we'll see you Thursday.
All about football for you.
Bye,
Bye
guys.
all.